So first of all, a very good morning to all of you who are listening to the talk today. Today is a very special day, and it's a Vesak Purnima day, and it is the most important, perhaps the greatest festival of the Buddhist. And on this day, according to the tradition, three things happened. The Buddha was born, the Buddha was enlightened, and he had a great departure on this very day. So it's an occasion to think about Buddhism, it's occasion to think about Buddha, it's occasion to think about his enlightenment, and his occasion is also an occasion to think about his great departure. So there is so much to reflect today on the Buddha, on his Dhamma, and on his Sangha, and all that fascinating aspects of his life and mission. As we switch on to the third talk today, where Lokamitra is speaking about a very important Buddhist Ambedkarite Institute, so which actually started, its establishment started in the 90s, particularly in the mid 90s. So it's one of the now old institute which has been catering to the training and teaching of the Buddhism, particularly among the youths, and it has many direct dimensions as Lokamitra explored in his last two talks. And the third talk, as we come today, is about Naglok and Dr. Ambedkar's vision of Prabuddha Bharat. So, like we can say that it's like we were living in the present and also thinking about the past. And now we are going to all the way think about the future, the vision as to what is the Prabuddha Bharat and what role or what place Nagaloka has in this vision of Prabuddha Bharat. So straightway I will hand it over to Lokmitra, but as we know that Lokmitra sir has been always, talking about Buddhism and also Baba Sahib's vision and also establishing this beautiful institution. So we begin with thank you, Lokmitra, and a warm welcome. So handing over it to you, Lokmitra.
Thank you very much, Yogesh. Namo Buddhaya Jai Bhim to especially on this occasion of Buddha Jayanti. So I'd like to greet you all on this very special day. This is the picture drawn by Baba Sahib of the Buddha. So these are the most terrible times for people throughout the world. And the Buddha's teaching and his example, as communicated through Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, can give us strength and help us through them. So I bow to the Buddha and commit myself to his teaching. When I was still in England in 1976, my teacher Sangrashta gave a series of lectures entitled Transformation of Self and World in the Sutra of Golden Light. In this series, he showed that you could not transform yourself through the Dhamma unless you were equally working on the world. Equally, you could not help the world to develop unless you at the same time strengthening yourself dharmically. Although I'd become a Buddhist a few years earlier, it was in this teaching that I found the real essence of the Dhamma. That was in 1976. That was when I really felt this is what I've been looking for all my life. A year later, I visited Diksharbhumi in Nagpur on the 21st anniversary of Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar's conversion. I had never come across such a situation in my life before. I was at that time a sort of temporary monk, an anagarika, and I was in yellow robes. And I arrived at Nagpur station. I didn't know it was the anniversary of his conversion, and many people came and respected me and gave me flowers, and I saw Buddhist flags everywhere, and I was taken to Diksharbhumi. And there were two platforms. The high one was the politicians and the lower one was the monks. I was put on that. And after the politicians had finished, the monks were taken up to the main stage. And I was asked to speak to, there must have been 500,000 people there. I think the biggest lecture I'd given in England was to 130 people. And I knew really nothing about Baba Seb then, but intuitively, I felt this was the most special place for Buddhism in the world. This was the place where the twofold transformation of self and society was possible. The twofold transformation that Sangharakshita had taught a year before. So this twofold transformation of self and society is really what Baba Seb's vision of Prabuddha Bharat consists of. A whole society being permeated by the principles and the practices of the Dhamma. A society consists of people. Without people, it's nothing. So it's only through the practice of the Dhamma that society will develop into Prabuddha Bharat. So it was this incredible vision of Baba Seb's that inspired me to live and work in India 43 years ago. Now, I went back to UK and came back in 1978 to live here. And at that time, most Buddhists in India were from Baba Seb's own community in Maharashtra. Outside, there were few in the main towns. One exception was, of course, Agra, which had a very, very strong Ambedkarite movement from the very beginning. So although the Baba Seb's vision was so great, it was difficult at that time to see how things would develop in that direction. But below the surface, things were developing. In the early 70s, you had the development of the Dalit Panthers. Later on in the 70s, Kanchiram started BAMSEF and went on from there, on and on and on. The Dalit literary movement was developing. And what I found was that in every major town in India, there are a few staunch Ambedkarites who were working really, really hard. We went to Hyderabad, to Chennai, to Lucknow, Delhi, Ahmedabad, Calcutta, everywhere. Not many, but a few really staunch Ambedkarites. A few days after I came to live in India, in Pune, in August 1978, I gave 3 lectures at the Ayya Ashram on Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. After the second lecture on the Dhamma, someone asked me a question, the most difficult one I've ever had in my life. How can we cultivate skillful mental states when our houses are burnt, our sisters and daughters are raped, and our parents are killed? The backlash over the proposed renaming of the Marathwada University had just taken place. 25,000 people and over 1,200 localities, Buddhist localities, had been affected in Maharashtra. I had no idea how to answer that question. I was completely out of my depths. I had come from, reasonably comfortable life in London. How could I teach Dhamma to people who had had such lives? However, the remarkable thing is that the Ambedkarites just seem to go from strength to strength. Here below is a picture of the Long March, Yogendra Kawade. Any difficulties that came in their way just seemed to make them more and more determined to destroy untouchability and strive for true equality, dignity, and humanity. And I've seen that again and again in the time I've been here. Similar thing with when the Riddles of Hinduism were published in the late 80s. There are enormous demonstrations against this publication in Mumbai. And in many parts of Maharashtra, there's a lot of violence on Buddhists. I had a tour in Vidarbha cancelled because of this, because there'd been killings of Buddhists in different parts, or so I've been told. The Riddles of Hinduism had stirred up so much hatred. But what did the Buddhist Ambedkarites do? they held larger and more peaceful demonstrations than their opponents. And in the end, the government eventually had to go ahead with the publication. So what you see in the 80s is this gradual build-up and strengthening of the Ambedkarite Buddhist movement. And when the centenary came in 1991, suddenly we saw that, it was not just a movement limited to a particular community in Maharashtra and a few pockets elsewhere, but that all over India, people were inspired, motivated by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And not just from scheduled caste and now all scheduled castes, but also scheduled tribes and some OBCs. And not just sort of also Christians from these backgrounds, Muslims from these backgrounds, Sikhs from these backgrounds. And many, especially the youth, wanted to know not only about Babasaheb and his social political teachings, but why he converted to Buddhism. This is a very, very big question. So at that time, we realized that the vision of Prabuddha Bharat was a real possibility, because the Buddhist revolution had now spread throughout, the Ambedkarite and Buddhist revolution was now spreading throughout India. We don't know how many Buddhists there are today, because many don't declare themselves on census forms, and many are not declared properly. But it's estimated that there are more than 50 million. Some say many more. Now, most of these are from the scheduled caste communities. There are, I believe, about 230 million scheduled castes in India. And the main influence on all of them now is Babasaheb. And to the extent that they are influenced by Babasaheb, to that extent, we have found wherever we've gone that they are open to Buddhism, because people, if you talk about Babasaheb, you talk about his great life, people want to know, why Buddhism? But not only the scheduled castes, but the scheduled, nomadic, and other tribes. I'm not sure of the figures, but I believe if you take the denotified and the nomadic and the scheduled tribes, you're probably getting on for 150, 175 million people in India. Some of them are now coming to Buddhism. In fact, quite a few. And then, of course, some OBCs are coming to Buddhism. That community is 50% of the Indian population, over 600 million people. And in UP, something very interesting has taken place. The Shakya community, which is the largest community in UP, I think it makes up 12% of UP. There's a very strong movement to Buddhism among them. And you've got this happening, little bits all over India. So the point I want to make is that in 50 or 100 years' time, we could have 300 million Buddhists or even more in India. Now, 300 million people respecting the Buddha, motivated, influenced by Babasaheb's incredible integrity and his panacea for India, and his incredible democratic credentials. 300 million people means it could be the dominating, deciding influence in Indian democracy. So this could be an incredible force for showing democracy on the or social democracy on the basis of Buddhist values. Even though the Ambedkarite movement is developing, the Buddhist movement is developing, even though more and more people realize that untouchability is a bad thing, violence and discrimination against scheduled castes and others continues. And actually figures show that in the last few years, there's been an increase in such violence. There are many atrocities committed on Dalits every day, all over India. Violence, mass murder, rape, burning of homes, forcing them to eat excreta. But what happens? Look at this picture in the middle here. You don't see the hammer and sickle. You don't see them holding swords. You see them holding the Ashok, the flag with the Ashok tracker on it, associated with Baba Seb. You see them holding the Buddhist 5-color flag. Yeah? They're not turning to violence. They don't want revenge. They want basic human respect and dignity, which the Dhamma brings. And again, the more people suffer discrimination and violence, the more they're turning to Buddhism. And this is the magic of Baba Seb and his incredible contribution to a peaceful India. So really, this is the first. So now in this context, I want to look at the way Nagaloka is contributing to Prabuddha Bharat. So the first area really is exploring, training people in, and propagating Baba Seb's approach to Buddhism. Yeah? If Buddhism is at the heart of Prabuddha Bharat, we have to understand and we have to practice his approach to Buddhism. So this is the first thing that Nagaloka is dedicated to. So I'm just going to give you a few ideas of Baba Seb's approach to Buddhism, which bring out the link he made between Dhamma practice and social change. So the first thing is the Bodhisattva. This, as you know, is from the Ajanta caves. We call Baba Seb a Bodhisattva. And a Bodhisattva is one who's dedicated not only to their own welfare and enlightenment, but to that of others. And the practices the Bodhisattva takes on are the paramitas. And the paramitas are virtues that strengthen us to enable us to work more effectively with others. And Baba Seb emphasized the paramitas. He mentioned the 10 paramitas in the 22 vows, which he expected all his Buddhist followers to take, and also in the Buddha and his Dhamma. So what does that mean? It means that he didn't want just himself to be regarded as a bodhisattva. He wanted us all to aspire to become bodhisattvas. He wanted us all to use the Dhamma not only to give ourselves better lives, but also to help uplift society. So this is the first aspect of Baba Seb's approach to the Dhamma. The second is looking at liberty, equality, fraternity as Buddhist values. Now this is an enormous subject, but these are not just principles, they're attitudes that we have to cultivate. In other words, they're practices, they're Dhamma practices. Liberty or freedom is a Dhamma practice. Yeah? How do we develop freedom of mind? Yeah? And so that's the first practice. That's the essence, if you like, of Buddhism. And Baba Seb says in the Buddha and his Dhamma, we develop it through developing our heart and developing our wisdom. But the Dhamma doesn't stop there. As he said when talking about Sadhamma, he said, our practice of the Dhamma, our freedom of mind, must manifest in establishing equality. He said, it's not enough just to practice prajna, shila, maitri, karuna. It must manifest in our behavior, and especially in promoting equality. And at this time, at the time of the coronavirus, we know about the terrible inequality in India, but we've seen it exposed more than ever before. So the duty of any Buddhist follower of Baba Seb is not only to practice the Dhamma, but to do everything they can on that basis to get rid of the terrible inequality that we see all around us and that so many of you have experienced if you're not experiencing it still. And then fraternity, he said actually a better word for that in the Riddle of Brahma, he said, is actually the Buddhist term maitri, universal loving kindness. Now, I don't have time to go into these as practices now, but you can see on the one hand, they're practices, on the other hand, you know, they're principles that manifest, permeate society. Yeah? They're practices and they have a social implication. Sorry. So I've actually said this already. talked about Saddhamma. He said the two aspects of Saddhamma, purification of mind, for example, through Prajna, Shila, Karuna, Maitri, and the creation of a better society. And he said, you can't have one without the other. You can't just have development of mind. Prajna, Shila, Karuna, and Maitri, if they do not lead to the creation of better society, if they don't lead to breaking down barriers between people, if they don't lead to establishing equality, then your practice of the Dhamma is not really any practice at all. So he was very strong in this. And then fourthly, he talked about karma. Now, we often hear karma used with rebirth in Buddhism, but he didn't talk about rebirth. Yeah? He approached it differently. He said, yes, karma means action, and karma vipaka means results of that action. Now, we usually think of the results impacting us, our minds, but he talked about how our actions impact the world, impact the moral universe. Now, you can look at some very powerful men in history. Look, for example, at the Buddha. His actions, his practice, his enlightenment is so strong, even today, we are being impacted by it. It's reverberated down the centuries. You look at some extremely negative people. I don't want to, I mean, let me take, say, Hitler. Yeah? It did so much harm. Still, that's reverberating. The implications of Nazism and fascism is still going on, not very strongly, but it's still there. So how we are, what we do, what we think, what we say, impacts society, impacts the moral universe. It affects others, they in turn are affected, and they affect others. So gradually, if our thoughts, if our actions are very, very strong, it has a widespread influence. So this underlines the point that Baba Sahib made. Dhamma has a positive impact must have a positive impact on the world, on the moral universe. And if we can do that, we will see it's not just now, but it will set conditions for that to reverberate later on. And you can see that. Baba Sahib died 64 years ago, but his influence is growing day by day. It is really quite a phenomenon. When he died, at that time, he was hated, as he said, by so many people in India. Day by day, his influence is growing. Day by day, respect for him is growing. And not just throughout the different communities in India, but outside India. So this is an example of how karma impacts the moral universe. There's one more aspect of the an image which exemplifies this approach of Baba Sahib's to the Dhamma, and that is our wonderful walking Buddha at Nagaloka. And we have to remember that after the Enlightenment, the Buddha, he spent a few weeks just absorbing this situation because his experience, it was so strong. But as soon as he's able to, what did he do? He set out walking. It took him a week to get to Sarnath, walking to Sarnath to teach his old disciples. Now, during the rainy season, he had to stay in one place because that's the very nature of the rains. But at the end of the rainy season, what did he say to his first 60 disciples? Bahujan hitaya, bahujan sukhaya. Go out to as many people as possible. And he said, don't two of you follow the same path. In other words, you'll get to more people that way. So walk, he said. Go out, he said. Don't stay in one place. And that's been the Buddhist tradition since then. 3 or 4 months a year in one place because of the rains, but 8 months a year walking out to people. So the Dhamma is not just to lead a comfortable life underneath a nice tree. It actually empowers us to do something for the world. So this is the essence of our approach at the Nagarjuna Institute at Nagaloka. Yeah? And this is what we're training people, young people from all over India in. Yeah? The Dhamma, not just for ourselves, but to create a better society. How does it help us to do that? And at present, we run 2 residential courses, as I said 2 days ago, an 8-month introductory course and a 3-year BA course as part of Nagpur University. At present, we're working on how we can develop these courses and our training to reach more people, perhaps through online courses, perhaps through shorter courses, and so on. We're all the time, of course, deepening our own understanding of Baba Seb's approach to Buddhism. I find, although I've been looking at his literature for so long, I find all the time I'm continually sort of inspired by his insights into the Dhamma. So we're doing that. And also we want to look at the implications of the Dhamma on other areas of Baba Seb's enormous program for social reconstruction. And this is a new area that we haven't really started yet, but we hope that after this terrible time with the COVID-19 that we can begin to do that. So that's the first thing that the Nagarjuna Institute does in terms of contributing to the vision of Prabuddha Bharat. And the second is through our All India network of students. And I went into this 2 days ago, so I won't repeat myself much. So many students are transformed and empowered through this training, and they want to use it to help them take Baba Seb's vision of Prabuddha Bharat to as many people as possible. Now we have over 1,400 students from 25 different states, and every year it's growing. And it's a community that transcends caste, transcends community, transcends region. Yeah? Now, if the vision of Prabuddha Bharat is to be successful, the Dhamma has to reach not only the educated urban followers of Baba Seb, but those in the slums and villages. Yeah? One of the reasons for the downfall of Buddhism in India was that Buddhism lost touch with people in villages because the monks were concentrated in the main universities. We mustn't let that happen again. We mustn't let it, the Buddhist Ambedkarite movement, just be an urban-based movement. Those in the villages and so on will be the backbone and the strength of this movement for change. So we're experimenting with different ways with our ex-students through what we call our Ashok Dhammadutta program that we started 2 years ago. We haven't found, if you like, we haven't yet got to the Guru Kili, as it were. We haven't got to we haven't found the Guru Kili fully yet, but we're on our way, and we're hoping that we will have a model that can be replicated all over India, a model of Dhamma teaching that will suit the needs and requirements of people from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC and other backgrounds in the villages, in the poorer parts of the towns. And in this way that we'll create Buddhist, or will contribute to the creation of Buddhist communities in many parts of India. And of course, many of our students are social activists, and they're doing remarkable work, especially during this pandemic. So we're training them or those who want to do even more work. So thirdly, we have to join hands with others. There's been enormous progress in India because of Baba Seb, but the situation is so terrible for so many millions of Indians. Look at these pictures. They're there today. We know who cleans the toilets, who cleans the drains, who lives in these most terrible living conditions. Yeah? Who is it who do the worst employment in India? Who suffers from harassment and atrocities? Yeah? And this ugliness has been exposed even more with the coronavirus. And so much of this is the result of caste attitudes. So this vision of Prabuddha Bharat is so vast, such a huge task, that no one person or organization can tackle this alone. So one of the ways we've been doing this to join hands with others is that for the last 15 years, we've been running Prabuddha Bharat conferences at Nagaloka. And so many people we find share Baba Saheb's great vision. They may work in different ways. Actually, that's a great plus point. That's a strength, because, you know, maybe we can't work in politics. Maybe some of us can't work in education or in other areas. We can work in the Dhamma. So we can contribute that. Others can contribute in other ways. So we have to learn to complement each other rather than to sort of be divided against each other and working sort of so much on our own. Incidentally, on the right was the late Hanumantra Udpre, who was a great OBC leader, a very, very great person indeed. And he died very sadly, very prematurely a couple of years ago. But he was very, very close to us. And then the fourth aspect of Prabuddha Bharat, which I sort of touched on 2 days ago, is engaging with Buddhists outside India. We've got wonderful facilities, and much help to create those has come from Buddhists in the East. And by helping us, you know, dana is never a one-way movement. By helping us, they have come in touch with Baba Saheb and his great vision and his peaceful Dhamma revolution. And they've become incredibly inspired. And some of them see India as the hope for Buddhism. You know, everywhere else in the world is in difficulties throughout the East. In the West, it's growing, but very, very slowly, because it's limited largely to middle class people. You know, there are pockets of life in the East, but on the whole, it's a religion for the older people. And this is what many of our friends in the East say. So they see Indian Buddhism revived by Baba Saheb as the real hope for Buddhism in the world. So we try and engage with other Buddhists, especially those who appreciate this approach of Baba Saheb's of Dhamma and social engagement. So we've become, some of us, centrally involved with an organization called the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. And this has members from all over the world, especially Asia. This is here, the picture of the founder at a conference we had with the network in Nagaloka in 2005. We've had several conferences since then. This is the founder, the great Thai intellectual Sulak Sivaraksa. Here behind him, you've got a very, very famous Korean monk, the most famous Korean monk, who's a very staunch social activist. And then you've got others too. So we're trying to link up with Buddhists who, you know, of course, they have different situations, but have a similar vision. What we've found through our contact with people in the East is that there's some very great socially engaged Buddhist teachers in Asia in recent times. Of course, next to Baba Saheb, there's Venerable Tai Shu from China, who died in 1948, an early death. Venerable Inshung from Taiwan, who I was fortunate to meet a few times, died in 17 years ago or so. Anagarika Dharmapala from Sri Lanka, who founded the Mahabodhi Society. Venerable Buddhadasa from Thailand, who a great meditation teacher, but also spoke about Dhamma and socialism, and you know, very, very concerned with the social implications of Dhamma, and was the main inspiration behind our friend Sulak Sivaraksha's founding of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. So all of them have brought Buddhism alive in the modern world, emphasizing social engagement. Not emphasizing just make yourself happy, not emphasizing even just Buddhism and science, but emphasizing social engagement, social implications of the Dhamma. So Baba Saheb is among them. You know, at the time of his conversion in 1956, he was dismissed by so many Buddhists throughout the world. But now he's recognized as being among the greats. and people. Even we had the Dalai Lama respecting him at Nagaloka. So, although there are big differences between the cultures and forms of Buddhism in different parts of Asia, they have many areas in common, which we're discovering more and more as we explore them. And we believe this relationship can contribute to peace and the development of Asia. And as it does so, it will impact the world. Obama called this century the Asian century. It's the time when the center of influence of gravity in the world is moving to Asia. And it's very, very clearly happening. Now, Buddhism is at the heart of much Asian culture and has the capacity to influence the way it develops. It's growing fast in China in a very different way. It's sort of there throughout the East. Yeah? And it's growing very, very fast here. So this fast growing and enormous Buddhist movement inspired by Baba Sahib in India, as well as his teachings, can contribute to the future, not only of India, but to Asia. In other words, the principle of Prabuddha Bharat is not limited to India, but it's wherever there are people, wherever there are societies. So this is the purpose of international interaction at Nagaloka, is to, as it were, work with others to spread this vision more widespread. And to do that, we have many conferences of people from different parts of the world and India. So this young man is a leading journalist from Hong Kong. Here we have two very leading Chinese monks, and Ratnateru from Sri Lanka, who's a member of parliament, but very sort of progressive monk. Professor Bodhi from India, from a Shedra tribe background, but a leading professor at KISS, Professor Sukhdev Thorat, who you all know, Chinese scientist, Rajay Gundru, leading government officer, a political friend from Nepal, Harsha Navaratna, the chair of INEB, and many, many others we've had. So all the time we're sort of bringing people together to discuss their vision, our vision, Baba Sahib's great vision. And in that way, we sort of begin to strengthen the bond between us. But it's not just the East. In the West, there are many people from socially disadvantaged and discriminated backgrounds. And they're beginning to realize the significance of Baba Sahib. Now, Lama Rangro is an African American. Many African Americans have become Buddhist. He visited us a few years ago and is in touch with some of our friends, especially Mangesh. And he's a leading Buddhist teacher, incredibly inspired by Baba Sahib. Gypsies in Hungary. This looks like any Zolputpati in India, but actually it's in Hungary. And this is a village of gypsies. The gypsies actually centuries ago came from India to Europe, and they've always been terribly discriminated, and they consider themselves the untouchables of Europe. Now here's some of them. Look, I don't know whether you can see on your mobiles this picture behind them, but this is of Baba Sahib. Somehow or other, they discovered Baba Sahib, and they named a high school after him. And because Baba Sahib became Buddhist, they started to explore Buddhism. And many of them have become Buddhist. This is an incredible story. So through Nagaloka, we have links with them. So to sum up, these are some of the ways in which Nagaloka is trying to contribute to Baba Sahib's great vision of Prabuddha Bharat. There may be 300 million Buddhists, 30 crore Buddhists in India in 50 or 100 years, maybe more. Soon it will be the strongest force for good in Indian democracy. At Nagaloka, we're training people from all over India in Baba Sahib's very special approach to Buddhism, transforming self to help the world. We now have alumni from 25 different states, and encouraging them to share what they've learned to the Dhamma as widely as possible, and also encouraging their social activism. But creating Prabuddha Bharat is an enormous task. We cannot do it alone. We have to join hands from others. Everyone has something to contribute. And not only that, but we need to link up with other socially engaged Buddhists throughout the world. So the principle of Prabuddha Bharat, Baba Saheb's incredible life and mission, can inspire others and impact the world. Baba Saheb said Buddhism was a revolution. Though it began as a religious revolution, it became a social and political revolution. The new conversion movement is young, very fast growing, and has enormous vitality and potential. It is a peaceful, democratic, egalitarian, and grassroots movement. It's already having a considerable influence on Indian politics. Yeah? Now, everyone has to respect Baba Saheb. Everyone has to respect the Buddha. Yeah? And it will continue to do so more and more. It's already changed the religious and social landscape of India more than anything else since the Buddha and Ashoka. If it goes on successfully, it will set an example to the world of non-violent social change on the basis of practice of the Buddha Dhamma. It will eventually have a considerable impact on other Asian societies at a time when Asia is taking lead in the world. The basic aim of Nagaloka and Nagarjuna Institute is to contribute to this unique movement in the history of the world. The grandparents of these young people were considered so-called untouchables. Through Baba Saheb's exceptional life and vision of Prabuddha Bharat, they have a chance to make something of their lives. And they can take a lead in creating a better India and a better world. Nagaloka is there to support this in any way it can. Namo Buddhaya Jai Guru. Thank you.
Thank you, Lokamitra ji. I have been just trying to see if there are any questions from the audiences. And it looks like your presentation was so good that there is no question to you. But let me ask you a few questions. How do you see that, India is a huge country with a lot of languages and diverse areas and different flavors of culture. So how do you see that, what sort of, what is it that binds together like this Nagalok students or alumni who come from all these different backgrounds and traditions and cultures or whatever? So what is it that binds them together?
Well, I mean, I think there are three things. I think just living together in one place for some time, getting to know people better is one thing, but that in itself is not enough. So I think Baba Saheb's great vision of transcending the old past is so important in this. So they share this together, and through their studies, they develop this more and more. And of course, as Buddhists or practicing a Dhamma, they're going in one direction together. They're not concerned about their past. They're concerned about their future, where they're going. So, in other words, any successful movement has to look at what it has in, respect differences, but look at what it has in common and work on that. So they've got their common humanity, they've got their common Indianness, they've got Baba Saheb in common, and they've got Buddhism in common. So those really need to be emphasized. And then their differences, like their cultural difference and so on, can enrich that situation. So for example, at Nagaloka, we often have cultural practices, cultural events. So we have a dance from Orissa, we have a dance from Arunachal Pradesh, we have a dance from Kerala. And it's wonderful seeing or drama, how these differences support each other.
So Lokamitra, to start such a big institute like Nagalok, it needs a lot of resources and a lot of money. And to run the activities of an institution like this, a fundraising is of essence, because without money, without funds, things cannot be done, and that's a huge thing to be done. So how do you envisage the financial future for Naglok? Like, how the community can sustain it?
Well, I think the community has to sustain it, first of all. I don't think we can rely on funds from abroad. And actually, probably only about half of the funds for running it come from abroad at present. We can't rely on funds from abroad for several reasons, one of which is we don't know what the future of the world is economically. India could well become stronger than other countries economically. We don't know how the recession is going to impact people. So we have to encourage people here to support, by supporting a student, because we don't charge our students. Yeah, most of them come from extremely poor backgrounds. We have to develop various forms of income generating activities. We've tried that. They've been held back a little bit by this COVID-19, because they're all to do with hospitality and conferences. But we have to, the community itself, when we started here 40 years ago, and when we started Nagaloka 20 years ago or so, the community wasn't really in a position to support such activities. It is now. And I hope that people will come forward and do so.
So dana being a very important practice in Buddhism. So how does Naglok encourage the practice of dana? Like in what forms, or in what is it that what are the ways to support Naglok?
Well, we basically do it in two ways. We have an outreach contact. So those people we know, we encourage to support a student or a number of students or help in some way. And then all people who come to Nagaloka, some give dana to the walking Buddha, and we encourage them also to support things. We have to upgrade our approach to this. But you see, people aren't going to give unless they know about Nagaloka. So we have to communicate what we're doing at Nagaloka. And this is where, I'm very grateful to your inviting me to give these 3 presentations. So, and in the end, I hope that our students, our ex-students, those of whom get reasonable jobs, will help to support the activities there. But that will take a little time. So those are the main ways at present.
Right. What is the significance of walking Buddha? I see that there is a walking Buddha behind you in your screen, and there's a huge walking Buddha in Naglok. So what is the symbolism behind walking Buddha? Why walking Buddha? And why in a particular form?
Well, as I said before, we wanted a statue of the Buddha at the center of the campus. And it had to link up with Baba Seb. And Baba Seb said something like, I like to see the Buddha walking. And the Buddha walking, when he's walking, is usually shown with his right hand in Abhaya Mudra, right hand in Abhaya Mudra. And yes, that's it. And fearlessness. So it represents one going out to people, not staying at home, not sitting under a tree, not staying in the vihara, but going out to people. The Dhamma in action, compassion in action. And it represents especially giving people fearlessness, courage. And that's what we all need at present. So this was Baba Seb's favorite image of the Buddha. And then a very close Taiwanese sculptor, friend of ours, very famous sculptor, undertook to create it and raise the funds for it. So that's what we have. And you'll see the face is slightly Chinese, slightly Indian and Chinese. So that's also important, because that symbolizes the sort of future of Asia, the sort of 2 great powers influenced by Buddhism in Asia. If we can come together, then we can really help to create a better world.
So Lokamitra sir, you culturally come from the West, you grew up there. and you spend a lot of time in India, and you are involved with this Nagalok work and Buddhism. So, what is it if you want to communicate the essence of Nagalok work to the Western people? How would you translate it into the realities there? So, for example, the country that you grew up is England, and we know that such as the political situation or other parts of the world. So, what message that you can communicate if you are asked to tell? How do you translate Nagalok's vision to the culture you grew up into?
Well, I think British culture is very different than American culture and other parts of the West. Because unfortunately, Britain has this strange relationship with India, which, sometimes communication gets twisted. But if I was talking to Buddhists, I would talk about the revival of Buddhism and then Baba Seb's place in that, and then the movement coming out of that, and the significance of the training. But I wouldn't, you have to be a bit careful, because if you talk, if you're not careful, then people can take a very patronizing attitude to Buddhists in India. So I think it's very important when you communicate what we're doing in the West and to communicate Baba Seb's, you have to show the dharmic significance of his approach. You have to be confident in his approach to the Dhamma. Yeah? Otherwise, they'll say, like some Indian politicians do, oh, what Baba said was great for you people, in other words, not for us people. Yeah. So it's a patronizing approach. So you would start by looking at the revival of Buddhism, looking at Baba Seb's place in that, and looking at the sort of breadth and depth of Baba Seb's teaching, but then show the centrality of the Dhamma. But then you have to show how dharmically pure his teachings are.
Right.
Whether I've answered you, but
doesn't
so
matter.
That's what we're trying to do at Nagaloka.
Yeah.
We're trying to train people in that. That's the context of Nagaloka.
Right. So, Lokamitra sir, I think we are heading towards the end of the presentation today. And as a parting words, after your 3 days, 3 talks, you have 3-4 minutes to just gloss upon or cogitate over or reflect on your 3 talks for the audience.
Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen as a result of this coronavirus. I'm sure that Baba Seb's movement is going to be much more relevant to India and the world after this. People seeing this incredible inequality staring them in the face. I think that, there's this question of authoritarianism versus democracy coming to the fore all over the world. People are worried about using apps, people are worried about the use of data, algorithms, and so on. And so I think there's going to be this tussle between authoritarianism and democratic governance. And I think that looking at the terrible inequality in the world, I think people in India and people in different parts of the world will look more to Baba Seb. And when they look at Baba Seb, they'll begin, some of them, to look at the foundation of his approach to social democracy, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So I just want us to sort of be ready to do everything we possibly can and enhance and develop our activities so that we can contribute. So it's not that I'm exactly optimistic about the world, but I'm very, very optimistic about Baba Seb and his movement. And so I would like to see Nagaloka contributing as much as possible to that.
So, Lokamitra sir, thank you so much for having presented the development and evolution of Nagalok and such a efforts, very commendable job, and its 3 talks have, I hope, given the audiences some kind of an insight into what is Nagaloka all about and how it is contributing to the Buddhist movement in particular and in general. And I hope that audiences, most of them, they come from different parts of India, and they would like to come and see Nagaloka maybe someday. And I hope that people will come someday to see the Nagaloka. And thank you so much for your talk. And we will invite you again for more discussion and deliberations. Meanwhile, I wish the thank you so much, and I wish the audience a very happy Vaisak Day once again, and have a wonderful day. Celebrate Buddha Jayanti at your home. There is always a reason to celebrate the life of the Buddha every day, perhaps every moment, and wherever we are, it doesn't matter that we need to be in the public program or we need to be in the vihar. You know, where we practice the Buddha Dhamma, that's a vihar. So I think it's an opportunity to reflect back. So enjoy your Vesak day on this day with your families and friends, and see you soon. Thank you, Lokan.
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you. One.
Ah.